Hebrews chapter 2, section 5, not ashamed of his brethren. In Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11, it states, "For both he that sanctifieth and they who are sanctified are all of one, for which cause he is not ashamed to call them brethren." We are all of one. We are one with Christ. We have the same life and the same nature, and for that reason, he is not ashamed to call us brethren. There have been so many times when I was ashamed and thought, I am not worthy to be called a Christian. For years of my Christian life, I had anxiety attacks that led to all sort of temper issues. I experienced years of PTSD from a cult that I was in. When attacks would come, the temper issues would cause me to lash out uncontrollably. Though I appeared fine to the world, my family knew I had these problems. This was just the tip of the iceberg of the sins that I confronted in my life. This made me ashamed because I knew I did not deserve to be called a Christian. In those times, the Holy Spirit would whisper this verse to me. He is not ashamed to call us brethren, quote unquote. Jesus is not ashamed to call you a brethren, even though you are a fool. You are a fool for Christ, 1 Corinthians 4:10. He chose the abominable, the weak, the foolish things that the world despises to confound the wise and the strong, 1 Corinthians 1:27. That is us. He is not ashamed of us. He is not ashamed to call us brethren. Can you imagine that? Do not be ashamed to call him Lord. Do not be ashamed to call him your big brother. He sanctified you and made you one with him and gave you his life. So we all have the same life. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 12 states, saying, I will declare thy name unto my brethren. In the midst of the church will I sing praise unto thee. This is another psalm he is quoting. This is interesting because Christ is declaring the name of the Father to us, which he promised to do in John 17. Quote, I have declared thy name and will declare it, unquote. Romans 8:15 tells us that we have not received a spirit of fear, but a spirit of sonship, crying, quote, Abba, Father, end quote. The Spirit himself witnesses with our spirit that we are children of God and heirs, co-heirs with Christ. Galatians 4:6 says that because we are sons, quote, God has sent forth the Spirit, capital S Spirit, of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father, end quote. What is he doing? He is declaring the Father's name to the brethren. He is not ashamed to bring us before the throne and say, quote, these are my brethren. Not only that, but I am going to call upon the Father from within you and reveal him to you so that you have to get to know him. You used to be afraid and shy back from him, but I am going to call out to him from within you. You are going to find out that he is bearing witness that you are his child and he loves you, end quote. Hebrews 2:13 says, And again, I will put my trust in him. Where is he putting his trust in him? In us. We partake of his faith. Remember Galatians 2:20, quote, I am crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. The life I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me, end quote. Our faith is fickle at best, a mustard seed at best. He does not trust our faith, so he gives us his own life and believes God from within us. We cannot be shaken. We cannot fall away from the faith because our life is bound up with him. The depth of Hebrews will show us that his life and our life are one life. And he is there to live this life for us and in us. He tasted death for us. He identified himself with us. And now he is declaring the Father's name in us. He is believing and putting his trust in the Father from within us. Hebrews 2:13b states, and again, behold, I and the children which God hath given me. He is declaring the Father's name, putting his trust in the Father, and then saying, quote, behold, look at these children. Look at this treasure. Look at what I have accomplished. Look at my great salvation. This will bring them into glory. They used to be foolish, but I am bringing them into glory, and they are going to reign over everything, end quote. Hebrews 2:14 through 15 states, for as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. In his death, he actually swallowed up the enemy's power over us and even trapped the enemy. When he became the quote-unquote serpent on the pole, he condemned sin in his flesh, John 3:14 and Romans 8:3. Satan didn't realize it, but by crucifying Christ, he brought himself to an end. Satan was trapped in that death, and his power over us was broken. Jesus delivered us. We used to be afraid of death. Everything we did was about our fear of death, but he is delivering us from that. So we grow more and more free to love and to give, because as we are delivered from the fear of death, we learn that we have an infinite supply of the divine life and everything that goes with it. Hebrews chapter 2, verses 16 through 18 states, for verily he took not on him the nature of angels, but he took on him the seed of Abraham. Wherefore in all things it behooved him to be made like unto his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make reconciliation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself hath suffered, being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted. He, Jesus, understands temptation. He has been tempted in every point, yet without sin. He knows what we are. He is touched with the feeling of our weaknesses, as we will see in the next chapter. This was to qualify him for his high priesthood. Because of his experience, he is able to help those who are tempted. He actually has been put in us. And as our high priest, he brings us to God and brings God to us. In our temptation and in our weaknesses, he actually feels our need and responds with his life. All of this in chapter 2 is his preparation for his high priesthood. In the next chapter, he is going to start comparing Christ and his high priesthood. This will go on for a while and is the main point of God speaking in Hebrews. It is a marvelous revelation that we need to see.